Hello, and welcome to the Specialty Matcha podcast. My name is Ryan. This is my co-host Zongjun, who also goes by Sam,
Hello, hello.
and we're the co-founders of Sanko Matcha Products.
Yeah, we launched this podcast to discuss our learning journey in matcha, share startup stories, and interview experts. And this episode, we have Billy from BHD Consulting with us today to talk about his journey with tea and matcha. Welcome, Billy.
Hey, Ryan. Hello, Sam. Pleasure to be here with you and discussing matcha. It's a super exciting category at the moment, and obviously it's kind of going gangbusters. I've done a lot of content work, and we get a lot of consulting questions about matcha and people trying to get into this powder space. So yeah, definitely top of mind for the industry, for consumers.
Yeah, we'd love to learn more about your both personal tea journey and professional tea journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, starting right at the beginning, I got into tea originally. I was an awkward high schooler. I was 15 years old and really preferred like more natural kind of forms of healing. Like I didn't, when I got sick, like I would try not to take medicine. Basically, is where I'm getting at. And that kind of led me to tea, and very quickly, this health and wellness aspect was the least interesting part to me. What
Yeah.
became much more interesting was the variety, the culture surrounding tea and herbals, the ceremony, this idea that tea can be a catalyst for cultural connection. That was really what inspired me.
Mm,
The flavors, obviously, too. I was a pretty avid cook even back then. And so I think also I was just very interested in the flavor spectrum that tea provides. And so all these components kind of came together and culminated into me just exploding with interest in tea. Started reading like hundreds of books. I kid you not, like hundreds of tea books, whatever I could get my hands on. I started reading, absorbing, and ended up taking professional training through an arm of the Tea Association of the US, which was the Specialty Tea Institute.
Yeah.
And I became the youngest graduate of that program at 17 years old. So
Cool.
my passion for this goes quite a long way. It's been almost 2 decades now that I've been doing, and tea has been incorporated in my life somehow. And yeah, I was pretty avid that tea was going to be my career for the rest of my life, even at that age. And so it was really just about stacking things and see where I could actually go with it. I became an entrepreneur pretty young as well. Going through university, I was studying business, like marketing and entrepreneurship. And I ended up, by crazy coincidence, there was a fellow student who was a year above me, still a good friend of mine, by the name of Chris Borgia. And he actually started a tea company. And it's crazy because our school was very, very small. There was about, I think, 2,500 students in these universities. So really small, tight knit campus.
mm,
So just the fact, and it was in like rural Indiana, like it was not in like a big city or anything, like rural Midwest. So just the fact that someone else even had a slight interest in the same thing as me was already kind of bonkers. And then on top of that, he had started a business. And so what I ended up doing was shadowing him and ended up taking over that business and really tried to use that business as like a case study almost through my university studies. I was never an academic in the sense that like I was not really a bookworm except for tea. And so studying business, I was like reading marketing research. I was like, well, no, I'm just going to go do it. Why? Because I have a medium. And I was in a good enough position, or fortunate enough situation, being in like an intimate school, that my professors were like, well, you're actually doing it. So yeah, you can use this as part of, studies and projects. I remember having to go out of class and like take sales calls. Like it was a really strange university experience. And then I also helped to co-found a coffee business. We ended up merging those later when we opened up a retail location and a coffee shop. And all this was a year, that all happened a year before I graduated. So my final year of university, I was working that business, but I knew I didn't want to stay around that area. And so so I came back home, which then was southern New Mexico, and ended up applying, reaching out to a bunch of contacts, and finally, as I was actually about to sign on for a role at Keurig Green Mountain as a coffee sensory professional, just because the tea job wasn't lining up, I ended up getting a Facebook message from still to this day, one of my mentors, and he offered me a position with David's Tea, and so I hightailed it to Canada. And I landed in February. I think it was like minus 22 degrees Celsius when I landed. And I was like, what have I done? But I was with them for just shy of a decade. Did product development primarily, but there was a lot more to it than that. There was different things about supply chain and vendor management relationship and marketing research that went under that umbrella of product development. And ended up my path there kind of reached a natural conclusion. I had felt that still very on very good terms with them, but yeah, I had just felt that my what I could give them was no longer like I felt like I was basically repeating the same motion over and over again. And so I was losing a bit of enthusiasm, which wasn't good for the business, also wasn't good for me. And so I decided to step out and do something on my own. So BDH Consultants, I have a business partner in LA, and he comes from actually a legal background, funny enough, but fell into entrepreneurship and fell into tea entrepreneurship and ended up opening a series of specialty like boba tea shops in Southern California. And so
Okay.
we got connected from that perspective. He had taken classes with me when I was teaching for the Specialty Tea Institute. Anyway, we kept that relationship open, but I knew that I wanted to go in business with a partner because I wanted to focus on the areas where I knew that I could really deliver my best to clients, which was primarily in making connections, whether it be funneling people to the right vendors for their needs, whether it was product development, certain supply chain, building tea product assortments. There was a lot of that type of work that really fulfills me. So that's where I wanted to stay. But I was like, yeah, but businesses also need operations. They need HR, even sometimes legal. Like there's a lot of other components that because of our partnership, we can bundle for our clients. And we've worked with everything from startups to multi-million dollar multinational tea brands. And it's really project by our latest venture. We are dabbling in community-based consulting. And by that, I mean we're opening up a community for guided learning for tea entrepreneurs aimed at pre-revenue and early stage tea startups.
Hmm,
And
cool.
that so it's guided moderation. It's kind of a paid like closed forum, right? Think of it almost like Reddit, but specifically for tea entrepreneurs, and a resources section with things like business plan templates, go to market strategy considerations, all of these tools that the members can use to fulfill whatever their tea dreams look like. But we wanted to bring more entrepreneurs into our fold and provide value for them because people need support, but it's just a matter of how do you make that support both accessible but also lucrative for yourself as a business owner. So that's why we started that, but we still also focus on some pretty large scale consulting projects for our other clients. So yeah, I spoke for a very long time, but I hope that gives you a very good background on me.
Yeah, for
That was
sure.
quite a story.
Actually, the thread of tea through that story is just makes it even more cool. It's
Yeah.
it's actually very uncommon for us to find other tea people that are very much understand it from business lens, industry
Mm,
lens, like and the concept of a tea entrepreneur. You just don't hear those words together very often, but like that's what the entire industry is. Especially when it comes to specialty matcha, it's just a bunch of small to medium-sized businesses all over the world who just can find a really great product, talk about it in a way that resonates with some people, and, like, builds this audience for this thing that just didn't exist, which is
mm.
it's so cool having, like, especially this founder circle thing that you're talking about is just, I think, so needed right now, especially in the space that we operate in, because those resources are so important. It's not just about the product, it's about everything else too.
That's it. And tea is a really interesting business because the barriers to entry are very low. You can start a tea
Yeah.
business for like 500 or $1,000. You can start
Yeah.
selling tea and build a brand and make something happen. Like there's not a lot of other industries where that's feasible. So that's both a benefit and a curse, right? Because then you have a market that's flooded because of this low barrier to entry. But then how do you actually get the business acumen to be able to grow, to be able to scale, to be able to stand out, all of that? My absolute favorite quote from my mentor who actually brought me into the fold of David's Tea. It was early on in my education through the Specialty Tea Institute, and I was asking him just advice because I was like, listen, I'm not at the point where I can like work full time in this. Like, I want to go to school, all this stuff, but like, if you had one piece of advice to give me about getting into the tea industry, what would that be? And deadpan, he was just like, the world doesn't need more tea geeks. It needs people who understand the business of tea.
Mm,
Mm,
And it
yeah.
stayed with me. It stuck because I see it so often now where I'm sorry, but knowing the history of how matcha evolved in China and then spread to Japan is not going to save your business. Knowing the differences in the growing regions between Uji and Kagoshima, as cool as that is, it's not going to save your business. You have to know how to actually sell the product.
mm.
Yeah. Where do you see people like what do they get right and wrong when it comes to tea marketing? Because we've all seen like a lot of cringe. And then like the really effective stuff that actually moves the needle. I don't know. I'm like a little suspicious that it's stuff that's like less mind blowing than you would think. Like how have you seen that? Because you've talked to and advised and been a part of so many different companies who are doing this. Like what do people get right and wrong?
Yeah, I mean, it looks very different for everyone. I think one of the first things is with speaking about matcha specifically. So many of these small time brands just fade into this sea of green, right? And you become just another matcha brand, unless you
Mm,
were an early mover, right? Someone like Cha Cha Matcha, someone like Matcha Bar, these companies that really help to kind of push and start the matcha boom on the coasts. They had the advantage of being early movers. What I think in talking with a lot of different tea entrepreneurs, I think most people just don't know their audience or know who their niche really is. So when we're going through, discussing go to market with clients, we try and drill into them that like know your customer. Like, is your customer named Alex? Are they what age are they between? Do they have kids? What's their job? What are their hobbies? Like, build yourself the person that you are trying to sell to. Not that it has to be ultimately your North Star. Things pivot, right? Things happen. You might be surprised by the market that you start to get, but go in understanding who your customer actually is. If you're selling, I guess it's like, it's always go in with the mindset of what's on the customer's mind, focus on your customer, and put all of your effort into satisfying their need, their wants, and try and make your business successful on that. If you're just running a tea business for your own pleasure, that's a hobby. Yes, it can be enjoyable, but ultimately it's a hobby, right?
Indeed.
For matcha specifically, what have you seen being more effective in talking to your customer?
Mm.
I think both can be effective, right? Look at one of my favorite examples, not matcha specific, but talking like content specific. Look at a company like Jesse's Tea House, right?
Oh, yeah,
Really,
I love it.
who's really, and I know Jesse. He's a phenomenal person.
Mm,
He's wonderful. We've sat down for tea together several times. What I think he does very differently than a lot of tea companies is he's built a brand persona, but he also knows exactly, again, going back to the customer, he knows exactly who his customer is, and he's trying to foster that community of people. His customer is first timers that want to explore Gongfu tea. That's his customer. He's not aiming for the collectors who are ordering their stuff from their own tea guy in China or their specialty tea place in Tokyo or whatever it might be, right? Like, he knows exactly who his customer is, and he's put all of his effort into building his content, his brand persona, his product assortments, everything
mm,
based around that identity. And so it's kind of a mix of everything, as you were saying, Sam. Like, you need to have all the pieces together, whether it's the content, whether it's the education. But I think a lot of people don't understand how to balance that. I think first and foremost, at least what I've seen, is communicating benefits effectively, outcomes. What does your product do?
Mm.
That
mm,
is the easiest thing for customers to connect. Frankly speaking, most customers probably are not going to care about, like, I'm talking en masse, are probably not going to care about cultivar differences between matcha. Some niche brands can go that route, and I think there's a space for that. But if you're looking en masse, like, most people aren't going to care about that. What are your outcomes? What are your unique selling propositions. You're tailoring your messaging around that versus around trying to bombard people with with education. I'm a huge fan. You'll see a thread throughout this. I'm a huge proponent of let's make tea accessible. Don't gatekeep for no reason. There's absolutely no reason to gatekeep whatsoever. I think it's what a lot of the specialty coffee places are doing wrong right now is, when you go into a coffee shop, if someone looks at you and expects you to know what carbonic maceration is, all of a sudden you're like, well, I got to get out of here. I just wanted, a cortado, or I just wanted like a nice drip coffee. Like it becomes very overwhelming because then you feel like you have to know these things to be a part of the club, right?
Yeah,
Mm, mm.
it's true. Forms these like very
Interesting.
insular, non-inclusive cultures.
Yeah. Like one, I guess one extreme example for that is Y2T. Like they are almost like anti-education, like the
Yeah.
other side of education, which is very interesting. And they are very successful too.
Yes, Paul is he's built himself a very, very good business and a really loyal customer base.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I think part of his whole, like, I don't want to call it a gimmick. That's not the right word for this. Part of his whole strategy is in a way accessibility. It's accessibility through mystery because you're buying a tea but you don't know where the heck it's from. He never tells you really where it's from. He's just like,
Hmm.
listen, this is a really good, matcha that I found in the back of a farmer's shed, and
Yeah.
I just want to sell it because it was really good value for money. Like those are the stories that he's telling. It's wild, but in a way,
Yeah.
I think that's also something very accessible,
Yeah.
right?
And
Yeah,
it's
but he
good
had to,
tea.
like, build up the trust somehow. Like, how
Mm,
does the next White 2T build up? Because I remember the first time I saw their marketing. I think it was in 2016. It was, like, a year or 2 after they formed. And some people were asking me about it. Sam and I were both into pour. We've been into pour for a long time. And, you learn pattern matching and everything about it. I don't trust it. Like, I don't trust it. These wrappers are weird. What is this gigantic whale doing on this brick of tea? Like,
oh no,
you
I
don't
love
know
it.
anything. I don't know who this Paul is. Like, and then like it just slowly eroded away. It's like enough people said, "No, man, it's like actually good. Taste it." Like, but now that like it's a really sticky type of trust though. It's a very like how do you how do people bridge that gap of I don't
Mm,
know who you are, and if you're buying this random matcha powder crap where even you don't know where it's from, and you hire
Mm,
someone to repackage it for you and stick on a label versus, turning into someone like a kettle, like a Rocky's matcha, where there's some level of trust associated with that brand.
you start with one person who shares your values, and you stack, and it takes a long
Mm,
time.
uh,
Truly, though, you have to start with one. If
yeah.
yeah,
one
crossing the
person
chasm.
if one person is going to believe in your product and idea and you've built a connection with one person, it will be possible to build connections with multiple people. Keeping that thread, that I think is where some brands go wrong, where all of a sudden they try and like overextend themselves into a bunch of different categories and try and expand in ways that don't satisfy their core customers or core group of people. Because then you start diluting. You do one
Mm,
thing really, really well and service this one type of customer really, really well. That's a pretty solid strategy. And
mm,
it's been a main theme even of different business strategy books that I've read from, these famous authors and business people, whatever. If you distill it down, that is a pretty core theme. The Kettle is super interesting. I really quite like what Kettle do in Brooklyn. I'm so excited. We have a client in Manhattan on the Lower East Side that is a customer of Kettle. So we go and visit them occasionally. But I am so excited to see Kettle's new like lab
Yeah.
kind of situation that they're building. Man, next time I'm there, that's one of the first places I'm going to go. I have to see what's going on with them. But they remind me of early
So cool.
days Intelligentsia,
Mm.
early days La Colombe, if we're keeping with coffee parallels. Yeah, but they've also still done a good job of keeping it accessible. It's expensive, but they don't barrage you with information unless you want the information. Other than that, it's just darn good Japanese tea.
Yeah.
mm.
How do you view the relevance of the traditional matcha blend houses and companies? I cannot think of a less consumer centric group of companies than the traditional blend houses. All of the products have very difficult names to remember and pronounce. They don't tell you anything about the product. Like, where do they fit into the future, especially as the practitioner base declines? But yet they're super popular. Like getting a can of Marukyu Koyama-en is like super hard. Even if you live in Tokyo, it's super hard. They're selling out so much. How do you see that fitting in where you have this wave of newbies who are positioning things very differently? And then you have these very traditional companies. How do you see that dynamic evolving? And especially because the traditional companies are really not customer centric. They don't seem to care about the customer at all, actually, beyond the tea ceremony practitioners.
Yeah. Man, there's a lot to unpack in your question. Wow, I don't even know where to start. I'll be quite honest with you. There's so much
Sorry, I might have
there.
stacked too much.
No,
Sorry.
no, that's fine. That's fine. It is a lot. It's forcing you to think. And I'll be honest, Ryan, I don't know if I have an answer for you. We don't matcha for as traditional and old and rooted of a product as it is. It's going through a change that I think no one really foresaw.
Hmm.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so we can speculate, we can try and make parallels, but ultimately we don't know what's going to happen with matcha. And anyone who tells you otherwise, it's a best guess, right? Yeah. Wow.
So I guess, Billy, when you were talking to all these new matcha founders or tea business owners, what are their perspective towards these legacy matcha brands from Japan? Do they see them as a competitor? Do they see them as a threat? Do they see them as do they just ignore them because they don't sometimes often have a huge presence overseas?
Hmm.
What are their perception to these brands?
I think some people might view them as competitors. Some people might view them as the founders that paved the way. In my view, the healthiest way to view them is looking at who their customers are, who are they catering to, and try and tackle a different niche. There's a lot of space for tea. It's
Mm.
not
Hmm.
it's not a very competitive market until you get to the grocery aisle. That's where things become very competitive. So
Oh.
these legacy, the legacy brands, like if we're talking, the Twinings and the Celestial Seasonings and these those grocery brands, bringing it back to matcha, we're not at the point yet where it's not a dog eat dog industry. So viewing your competitors as where they've targeted and what piece of the pie they've cut out and trying to pivot and go somewhere different, I think is a very healthy way to view how to build your brand or get your brand to stand out. And the legacy companies have played a really important role. They built a foundation. They've built an association with quality and taste of place. But
Mm.
even that is changing dramatically. You have some really high-end, high quality matcha coming out of not just Japan anymore, but you have high quality matcha coming out of China. You have high matcha quality coming out of Korea. Excuse me. You have high quality matcha coming out of Vietnam. Like all these countries are starting to produce because the demand is there. People cannot get enough matcha,
Mm.
and so they're stepping in to fill the gap. But even they're trying to figure out where they fit. And if we even go into it, we can start talking about some of the issues involved in grading as well. That's another thing, right?
Yeah.
What the heck does ceremonial matcha mean? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And not going down that rabbit hole too much. I do think there's value in looking at how we can recategorize
Oh,
matcha and understand the grading from a different perspective. Because I do think grading is important, but not in the way that I think most people think is important. A more useful framework and lens would be looking at grading matcha through end use or use case, right? This is more for to be added with milk. This is more for the food industry. This is more for drinking on its own. Like end use case and very bluntly speaking, end use case, I think is one really valuable way to view grading and terroir. That's going to be the other lens that I think will really impact grading in the future, right? Because you're going to start having more terroir associations. Yes, within Japan itself, but then also look at Korea. Is it mainland? Is it Jeju Island? What area of
yeah.
China is this coming from? That's going to start to be pretty important.
Mm.
But I mean, the demand is crazy. I was speaking with one of the largest matcha producers in China. You know, they supply to like Starbucks and like all these global brands. And I was reaching out to them on behalf of a client, a North American based client. And the email back was, "Hey, we're sold out until the beginning of 2027, and even then, people are starting to buy, gonna be buying and putting in their orders for that year.
Wow.
That's the soonest that I could get something to to this client of yours would be like maybe the middle of 2027, and this was last year.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Crazy. Well, now, I mean, the majority of the matcha volume is coming out of China. If you just purely look at the numbers,
Yeah.
it's all these people who are like so anti-China, matcha must be made in Japan, blah, blah, blah. They should be grateful that how much matcha the Chinese are producing because their Japanese matcha would like quadruple in price, maybe even more.
Yes.
It's just from a business lens, like I think Japan is much better off in the long run, just producing higher and higher quality. Because
It's
I actually think they're in a bit of trouble because I think the Chinese are getting pretty close to blow the quality out of the water for the mid tier. And like all of this very high volume stuff coming out of Kagoshima or Shizuoka or places that are less well known as compared to like a Yame or an Uji. Matcha, the Chinese are probably going to be able to produce the same quality at half the price. And if you're a cafe, and that's where most of that volume's going, they just probably don't care, especially if there's no sensory difference. It's
yeah.
I don't know.
Well, yeah. Well, from a tea buying perspective, like if we're looking at, I don't know, let's use Luckin Coffee as an example, right? If they're looking for a
Mm,
matcha supplier, they're not going to be going to the tiny farm in Kagoshima. They're going to say, I need consistent quality, consistent volume, and consistent price.
Mm,
They're going to go elsewhere. I do also think that what people may also not realize is some of the larger matcha producers in Japan do have some level of presence in China as well. So I'm very close with one of the largest matcha producing companies in Nishio, and they have a very strong presence in China as well. And they started very early on, I think because they saw ahead a little bit and started investing in infrastructure in China as well. And I think that's going to be so advantageous moving forward, right? They're already supplying to places like Costco in North America. So bulk, but pretty darn high quality stuff, all things considered, because they know how to produce it. Facing it, China's got more room for expansion and output. They just do.
yeah. Well, the Japanese company, I wish everyone would just be more transparent too, because we know a lot of tencha goes back. The flow of tencha is not the direction most people think. It goes back to Japan and comes out as Japanese matcha. And like this is a very, to use a horrible matcha pun, shady industry in a lot of ways. Both labeling and like accurate provenance. And the disappointing thing is it's not just the big players. It's not like the gigantic Nishio companies or the big ones. It's also like in Uji. Like this concept of Uji matcha is not from Uji at all. It's like 1% of the Uji matcha comes from Uji. Like it's even at the highest ends, you can't trust provenance, and which makes me worry about like a thriving specialty market where terroir and like the taste of place or the different production styles and fertilizer recipes, they're leading to these different flavor profile outcomes and just kind of get like washed out because they just get blended out and labeled this generic term. It's not specialty at all, actually. It's almost the definition of a commodity product. It's and then you can't buy direct from farmers. Large parts of this value chain are impossible to access.
Yes, the transparent. You're right. The transparency is non-existent. I'm hoping that certain blockchain technologies and smart contract technologies can help with traceability. That's something I want to see more of in the tea industry. And I am not by any means a blockchain expert, right? But I know that there's certain traceability that can come through smart contract tech inserted into the supply chain of agro products. People are already looking to do this with cocoa and with other agro bananas, another good example, where they're really trying to better track the supply chain for both the customer, but also for themselves as larger buyers, right? So I do hope some of this technology can help to curb that, but you're absolutely right, Ryan, where understanding how to stand on your own laurels instead of try and copy, as you say, a taste of place, that is where I think this redefinition of terroir has to make a difference because then Chinese matcha can really stand on its own laurels. I think that would actually be a great thing for the Japanese matcha industry and the matcha industry overall. If people stop saying, oh, good matcha only comes from Japan, and instead the mindset is, have you tried this matcha from Japan and this matcha from China and this matcha from Jeju? It's going to open up the market, I think, a lot, and yeah, just make it more accessible. Again, that thread of accessibility.
Yeah.
But we see issues in the tea industry all the time with this, right? Darjeeling in Nepal is another huge example. It's something like 70% or 80%. It's a wicked number of all of the Darjeeling tea branded, labeled as Darjeeling, sold in the world is not from Darjeeling at all. Typically is green leaves from Nepal that are imported into Darjeeling, processed in Darjeeling, and exported as Darjeeling.
Interesting. I had no
And
idea.
so we see this in multiple industries, and especially with in places that have like a legacy name. Darjeeling is
Mm.
one of the
Yeah.
most, you know, storied places in the tea industry. And so yeah, we're seeing this in Japan as well.
Yeah. In China too, like Longjing and Da Hong Pao. It's all tea leaves from like other parts in Fujian or like even Sichuan. This tea laundering kind of business is not new.
No, it's not. I did a whole article about counterfeit tea on my Substack, which is aptly named Steep Insights. And so I did this deep dive into counterfeit. And yeah, Taiwanese oolong, the same problem.
Yeah.
So much of
Mm.
it is imported from Vietnam and repackaged and resold as Taiwanese high mountain tea.
Oh.
But I also think what a lot of people don't realize is Taiwanese tea growers actually helped to start the quality like oolong production in Vietnam. And so in a way, it was self-feeding, but I also do see now steps that are being taken to ensure that Vietnam as a tea industry can stand on its own and not have to be rebranded. I think that is really the key here, where if you're just trying to copy and emulate something
Mhm.
that you're not,
Yeah.
that's not a good recipe. Like, understand your terroir, understand what the best you can bring out of it is, and focus on that.
Yeah. I went to a
Mm.
wine conference once, I think about 8 years ago. It was a Association of East Coast US Wine Producers. Can imagine how good their products were. And I think there was some winery in Virginia that came to France, brought back tons of, like, classics, and said, had their whole staff taste them and said, "This is the gold. This is like the North Star for us. Like, this is the top of the top. We need to produce stuff that tastes like this." And this whole speech was about this. And I remember thinking, no, like, why don't you just try making the best that you can with what you have? You're never going to make that Bordeaux blend. Like, it's never going to be anywhere close to that. Like, you're a Virginia winemaker.
Yeah.
It's weird how people all this emulation culture.
Yeah, well, it's if you're copying someone, you're trying to snag a piece of the pie that like is not even a pie that you like the flavor of. I don't know, like it just doesn't make sense. It makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah. Well, I guess the biggest reason behind this is money, right? Like you can obviously
Of
sell
course.
for higher price if you tag it with a different name. But I feel like the ultimate solution is that people can end up making like similar amount of profit using their own GI or be themselves, and I think that will be
Well,
the hardest problem to solve.
it's a demand problem. There is no demand for, let's say, like Kagoshima matcha or for Shizuo. Yeah, a little bit now, with all of these new vendors highlighting, or Nishio Matcha, or Toyota Aichi Matcha. These names are super new. Maybe you hear, not all consumers know it's even from Japan. If they do learn a place, it's probably Uji or Yame. And then like it just everything else gets washed in the, gets lost. And actually that's this where specialty I think can really kick in. It's cool. Like if you go to a place like Bangkok with a really advanced matcha scene, you'll find places that have like 3 different products from Toyota Aichi. Like, that's super cool. Or from Nagasaki, or from like all of these places you don't commonly hear about. And it's exciting to see that kind of evolve. But the Japanese don't make it easy to buy. I guess newcomers coming in, getting access to this material in those places is so hard. What
Yeah.
advice do you have to like, you know, new matcha companies in sourcing, especially in Japan, and trying to get their foot in the door in some of these more off the beaten path places?
Gosh, yeah, direct sourcing is a hard game. Truly, it's a hard game, both from available quantities, import, export, things like that. My advice to new entrepreneurs typically is start with a trusted wholesaler or distributor in your locality, right? So I won't name names, but there's some wonderful wholesalers of really good, like transparent, high end matcha in North America. It saves you time. You start to understand your own consumer better first, and you can test products from multiple
Mm,
companies, dial it in, and then get to a point in volume where it makes sense for you to start going and talking with these people. Because if you go to Japan to a farmer and I'm a startup, I don't have any revenue, like they're probably not going to sell to you. Not because they
mm,
don't believe in you, but just because they don't know you. Like it takes a
yeah,
while to develop this relationship of trust, because that's really
Mhm.
important when buying and approaching people, is developing that trust. And yeah, part of that trust is going to come with money and consistent orders. It just is.
mm, yeah, that makes sense. Just build up that transaction history and, keep
Yeah.
showing up.
Yeah.
You
and
see
and
all these.
and don't get me
Sorry,
wrong,
go ahead.
don't get me wrong, you can do it. You can start your company by direct sourcing. I'm not saying you can't, but there is a lot more friction than I think people might realize,
Mhm,
because then you become the sourcing person, the logistics person, the customs and duties and testing person. On top of that, you're trying to market your product, you're trying to build your website, you're trying, like, one person can really only do so much, truly, really.
yeah, indeed.
Totally agree. We've been seeing like a lot of these new founders going into Japan trying to like even talk to anyone. It's really not happening these days unless you are extremely lucky or you end up knowing someone that gives you an introduction.
That's it. Knowing and having a network is vital. That can move mountains in not
Mm,
just the matcha industry, but in the tea industry in general.
mm,
Truly. I know even for my own business, there are some vendors where just because they know me and trust me, and if I believe in, let's say I believe in my client, I'm like, they're gonna go places. Let's bend your typical rules a little bit and get them in the door, because I know that they're gonna grow and have a trajectory. And that is all word of mouth. It's all word of mouth. Like, and trust in through, down the chain. So yes, that example I think is a really valid one, Sam.
mm.
In your time in David's Tea and product development and working with all of these tea companies, how do you think about like consumer preference acquisition and building ladders? Like, how does someone go from drinking a marshmallow flavored blend tea to wanting to have a Longjing or an Uji matcha? And like, what are like really successful ways at building these ladders to move people from, maybe a matcha latte to an usicha to, single cultivar, single origin kind of thing?
I love that question, Ryan. The term that I love to describe this consumer behavior is graduation.
Mm.
you're graduating, let's say, to the next level. And I'm not trying to say it's a hierarchy. It's not that at all. But there is an upward trajectory both in quality, and typically that's directly related to price as well, right? So we can also think of it as a price graduation. The higher up the ladder you go, typically the more money you're going to pay for your product. I think first, coming in with a perspective and understanding that not everyone is going to graduate, and be realistic about that. I think that's first and foremost. The second thing is, do you want to be everything to everyone? That's another big
Yeah.
question, right? Dilution of customer was, and I think still is, a big issue for a lot of tea brands. So in the
Yeah.
case of David's Tea, just because I know their customer, I know the type of market that they service, and if we're speaking from matcha directly, David's Tea is one of the largest retailers of matcha in North America. They have a huge volume, and it all comes from Japan, from Nishio specifically. They first started by selling straight matcha, and the quality was pretty darn good. Even the lowest grade of matcha that they started with was stone ground entirely.
Oh, wow.
But they positioned it both in price and to consumers as latteable. What I think changed the game was when they started introducing flavored matchas on the market. So matcha either mixed with sugar and flavoring, or just with flavoring itself, or with other powders, because then you start to build that more entry level category, right? Getting someone into matcha by offering a strawberry flavored matcha is a pretty easy gateway for many people that are brand new to matcha. And there was definitely a certain amount of customers that did graduate, as we'll say, up to their highest tier matcha. They may not buy it all the time just because of price, right? It was like a special occasion kind of a thing. Actually, there's some funny story about that. That matcha um, was one of the highest redemption products on people's loyalty points. So people would reach
Yeah.
like a certain amount of loyalty and be able to have like credit or whatever. And there was a huge number of people, even non-matcha drinkers, surprisingly, but that were like, I want to spend my
Oh,
loyalty points on this because it's one of the most expensive things that this company sells. Right. So we
yeah.
found that super interesting, where there was this like prestige element.
Hmm.
But then there are some,
Interesting.
that's it. But then there are some customers that just buy, bags and bags and bags of flavored matcha and just stay there. I think matcha was, or I guess is, a category still within David's Tea that is very surprising, in that they seem to be able to deliver to a wide spread of customer without diluting this perception of quality. I don't know if I would say the same about their leaf tea assortment. Just not because the quality is bad, but I think it's just over diluted. There's like 170 different SKUs. Like it's
Wow.
how does someone navigate
Wow.
that? How do you go through that? Matcha as a separate category does not have that many SKUs. It's a lot easier for customers to navigate. So I think graduation is about a few things. One, it's about actually providing those options, but understanding your customer journey, and if you and positioning, if you even want to capture that whole journey. Some brands do not care about capturing upward momentum, this idea of graduating to next levels. And I also think
No.
that's totally fine and totally valid. Why? Because you're focusing on a niche that you serve really, really well. The type of customer typical of David's Tea in terms of revenue was what we classified at one point as the hedonist customer, right? It was these customers that wanted big bang, big impact. They wanted to drink the s'mores tea. They wanted to drink the strawberry lemonade tea. They wanted all of these flavors, but stuck there. And it was a massive, massive revenue driver for that. And I think as tea people, the team was always trying to like maybe get them to evolve when they didn't want to,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
There's
But I
more
think
of a push than a pull. The customer's pulling
Yep.
you. It's like you want the better thing, climb up the ladder. Mm.
exactly, exactly. So I think it comes down to
Promote.
a few things. One, it's, yeah, do you even want to be the company that supports that graduation? And that is a very valid question. And then what was the other one? Oh, yeah. So do you want to be the company that supports that graduation? But how do you do it without over inundating with too many SKUs and ending up in decision paralysis?
Yeah.
It's confusing
That makes
people.
sense.
Yep. And also, I feel
Yeah.
like from a consumer perspective, it's the same product can be a graduation point at different time. I feel some people
Yeah.
just go back to simpler product that they started with and stay
Heck
there
yeah.
after being through the whole ladder.
Yeah. So let's say I'll take myself as an example. I drink some really high end tea, right? So funny enough, I'm not actually a regular matcha drinker. I love tasting matcha. Surprisingly, I don't drink a lot of matcha, but I do a lot of gongfu or teapot or grandpa style, whatever. But I am absolutely that customer where I can go and buy the really expensive yancha, but then I'm also like, yeah, but I have this like immunity tea bag with like zinc and echinacea. And so I'm going to go throw one of those in my cup because that is serving me at that moment. Right. With matcha drinkers, I think we're going to see this as well. There are going to be people that want to go to this kettle bar and order the single cultivar matcha, whisked as koicha, but then can go back and be like, oh yeah, but that matcha latte from this one place, that maple matcha latte that this one place did was super good. I want to go back and have that. And we're going to see that a lot more in particular with Gen Z. I just finished an article for Stir Coffee and Magazine about Gen Z preferences, and it's super experiential.
Mm.
And both of those are two different experiences that satisfy two different needs at two different times. And you can still be the same customer and do that, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
They just doing 2 different jobs. Yeah. This,
Precisely.
makes so much sense. Just as a last question to wrap up, what gets you excited? You are, like, super plugged into the tea world and the tea industry and new companies, new positioning, like, what's cool that's happening or that's gonna happen just in general in the next couple of years?
Yeah, that's a fun question. Well, what excites me? Number one, the people excite me. I am so network driven. I love the people in this industry. It's an industry that my colleagues and people that I work with and have, the hard discussions with are also some of my best friends. So, first and foremost, I think that is always going to be my anchor. Yes, I love the product without question. I love the product, but at heart, like I love the community that tea has
Tea
developed.
people are the best. Yeah.
Tea people are the
They really
best.
are. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, you asked what energizes me. That's what energizes me about this. What energizes me about what we're going to see down the road? Oh my gosh, there's so many things that I think are really exciting right now. There's some amazing stuff happening with ready to drink tea at the moment. And in particular with the sober curious movement, where tea I think has an opportunity to capture a huge market space of people that want to enjoy experiential products without the alcohol. Because historically, alcohol was always the sophisticated product. Oh, you want to taste Provençal region of France. Oh, you're going to have to taste that in a wine, right? Like that was always the idea. It was always attached to alcohol, whereas tea offers something completely different. And there are some amazing companies that are doing sparkling teas and botanical infusions, different fermented products using tea, not just kombucha, but all over the spectrum that cater to a customer that is looking for something super high end. I was in New York a few years ago and had the privilege to go to a restaurant called Atomix, which I think was actually rated
Yeah.
number one restaurant in North America not long ago. Phenomenal dining experience. And we got their mixed pairing. So it was an alcohol and alcohol free pairing. I was with my business partner. And the alcohol stuff, great. It truly, what left a bigger impression on me was some of the non-alcoholic pairing options that they had. And a couple of them were very it was tea based to some degree, or it had botanicals included. And so if you're asking really what I think is a big frontier, the non-alcoholic space is something to watch. Even if relating this back to matcha, I definitely see a place for some kind of sparkling single origin matcha poured out of a champagne bottle, there that is going to be something that consumers will be keen on, not just tea consumers, but people that are looking for experience-based beverages that don't want to drink, but want that occasion, right? If someone can nail doing that, but for matcha and other Japanese teas, that would be pretty killer.
Yeah, it'd be cool. Actually, someone earlier today just forwarded me a link about some guy in Kuala Lumpur who's throwing matcha raves that are all sober raves.
Yeah,
Pretty cool.
it is. Max
It's niche
Falkowitz.
filling.
Yeah. Max Falkowitz, who's a pretty prolific tea writer based in the New York area, he just did an article on like sober bars or non-alcoholic spaces, whether it's events or a restaurant or bar or whatever. Um, and tea is such a common thread in these places. And I'm so excited to see where that goes and who else it will bring into the fold of tea, because
Yeah,
is lateral movement, I think, and market acquisition. So there's so much
yeah,
potential. The alcohol,
yeah,
how much bigger is the alcohol industry than the tea industry? Massive. If you can
yeah.
pull even an eighth of that industry into your fold, the tea industry explodes with new customers and new revenue opportunities.
Totally. And the alcohol-free options need things that aren't sweet. Like, what adult wants to have a soda when everyone else is like, it's like you don't turn to a CSD or a juice. Their alcohol-free options are like for children, like mostly. So I
Exactly.
think that's a perfect vacuum for tea to fill.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it's coming. It's definitely coming. Europe is really the hot spot, I think, right now for these tea-based beverages. There are a lot of brands out of Europe that are doing some really cool non-alcoholic tea stuff.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
had one from at the Berlin Tea Festival from a company called EST. It's in champagne bottles. It's all caffeine free. Wow, they mastered the acidity. It had just enough sweetness to give it body, but it wasn't sweet, and it had just a beautiful aromatic profile. Like, it honestly, I think if I wasn't paying attention, I wouldn't have realized it wasn't alcohol. Like, it was just a well-crafted beverage that you could sip slowly, like just like you would in those use cases. So super,
Absolutely.
super exciting to see.
Well, someone's got to do that with some matcha. That's the next product I want to see on the shelf.
Same. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know we're a bit over, but really appreciate it.
All good. Next thing on my agenda is a haircut. So all good. Seriously, Sam, Ryan, huge pleasure speaking with both of you. I'm going to keep thinking about that question that you asked, Ryan. The one that kind of stumped me. I think it was definitely a good one, and we'll have some further conversation about that.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you, dear listener. If you enjoyed this, please consider sharing it with a friend, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.
See you in the future.